How's it? Good day and welcome to Extra Fresh, one of the rare video appearances that we do. But it's special today because I got my good friend Rob Haden-Smith with me. And Rob's brought us some beers, which we'll talk about a little bit. They're also available in our next Belgium mixed crate. So today I thought, Rob, we both love cycling, we both love beer, we love a good time. And I thought I'll bring you on and just talk about the beer, cycling. I think a good place to start is where we've met.
Yeah, lekker, Evan. Thanks for having me on the show. It's if any country combines our two passions, beer and cycling, it's probably Belgium.
Yeah.
We met cycling. Crazy, waking up at 5 a.m, riding up hills. I just love the fact that Belgium's a nation that sort of holds both cycling and beers up there.
They're pretty hardcore works because if you look at the cyclocross, which is in their winter now, it's mud and wet and hardcore. Their beers, I think, reflect that to a certain extent because they don't have a lot of 2%, 3% beers. They're all double, triple, quads, aged 6% to 10, 12%. You know, it seems like quite a passionate group of people.
Very passionate, and they also have different beers for different seasons. So certain beers like the Petrus are drunk a lot in winter, and other refreshing beers in summer. So, these things are seasonal too, and sort of coincide with the cycling season too.
I think before we continue too much cycling, I'm going to pour us a beer, and I think we should start with the Kwaremont. So while I pour it, would you mind opening that for us? While I pour it, so maybe just tell us a bit about Kwaremont. This is linked to cycling. But what makes it what it is? Why is it so special?
So Coromont, for this particular brewery, is quite a new beer. Well, new as in it's sort of 10 years old or so. And
it's like cycling, a baby. It's a baby in Belgium. Like a brewery that's only 10 years old. It's like
the brewery's older.
Oh, the beer.
The beer is
okay.
Their biggest brand is Petrus, and they do have a blonde in the Petrus range called Petrus Blond. But Coromont is one that identifies with cyclists. In cycling, besides the Grand Tours, there are 5 big races called the 5 Monuments, and one of them is the Tour of Flanders, otherwise known as De Ronde or Flanders Moister. Tour of Flanders is about 240 k's,
okay.
And why it's so iconic is they're about 23 or 24 cobblestone hills, otherwise referred to as Hellingen, and
made of this.
Yeah, cobble, but they're very steep, some of them 23% gradient, and it's always raining, so the guys struggle to get traction up there. And what's interesting is that the Kwaremont the Eau de Kwaremont climb, it's the second last climb in the race, and it's often the decisive one. Okay. So the winner normally launches his decisive attack there, and then there's one more climb, but the kind of damage is done there. So the brewery sort of, even the glass has got a cyclist on it here, and the beautiful cobblestone base.
No, that's quite
pretty. And even their sort of brand manager for Kwaremont is an ex-cyclist. He won one of the other big races, Ghent-Wevelgem. They sponsor cyclocross. You'll see on the podium of cyclocross races, they've got a huge Kwaremont glass.
Yeah, and I think do the winner drink out of it's like a 10 litre of huge glass.
Giant one of these. It's brilliant.
Well, listen, cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming and sharing the knowledge and experience. It's great. It's a blonde style beer. It's nice because it's mildly boozy, but not overly so. It's a blonde. It's got a little bit of sweetness. Nice mouthfeel. I particularly like this for slightly colder weather, and I think when you do cyclocross in Europe in their winter, it's pretty cold. I think this would go down well.
The other interesting thing is that the alcohol percentage is 6.6%, which is the exact gradient of the hill.
Oh.
So the average gradient of the Kwaremont, I think it's about 2.3 k's long, is 6.6%, which doesn't sound that steep, but given that it's on cobblestones and very slippery, it's actually quite a tough climb, and it comes late in the race. The other motto in Belgium, a big thing in cycling, is this thing called the Kopman. And the Kopman's the guy who pulls on the front. Because for those that don't know cycling, the guy on the front is taking the wind on his chest and doing a lot more work.
That's all the hard work.
Yeah, so I guess the brand with Kwaremont is it's for the Kopman, the guy who takes the lead, not a follower, and that's really it's a brave man's beer, basically.
Well, it's phenomenal. I've actually dug into quite a few after I got a craze from you, and it's nice coming home from work and just having one with dinner. You know, like having one or two of these. It's just hits the spot. Sometimes you get a bit tired of just all the light beers around, and sometimes you want something with a bit more oomph and body and character.
Yeah,
and I think in this case, story. So that is phenomenal. I actually had prepared a couple of questions, and I'm just going to write them down here. So Rob, as you probably picked up on now, is like a walking encyclopedia of cycling. It's incredible. How do you remember like every race name? Like this was snowing, and this I don't know. At school, could you remember like the history stuff? Like
yeah, I was good at stuff that interested me. Funny enough, and basically I have a mind for useless information. Often when it's important and it doesn't interest me, I have a bad memory. But
unfortunately for me, even if it's important and it interests me, I forget it. So I'm really bad at that. So I'm always in awe how you can just remember all of this.
We first time I in 2015 we went with some mates to do the amateur version of the Tour of Flanders, and we had this great idea that halfway up the Kwaremont hill we'd turn and go to a pub and actually drink a Kwaremont and then ride the last 30 k's to the finish.
Halfway up the Kwaremont.
Halfway up there's a pub on the right.
Okay.
And we thought, that would be quite cool to stop, grab a Kwaremont, drink a Kwaremont, and then finish the Kwaremont and the last climb the Patterberg and ride into Oudenaarde. But of course it was raining and cold and miserable, and when you're going up there we just were like, we want to get to the finish here and get dry.
There's a lot of breweries in Belgium, and Belgium's not big. Like, how big is Belgium? Smaller than the Free State.
Yeah, it's geographically small, but there's sort of two mains. There's the Flemish beers and the Walloons are the French-speaking Belgians, and the Flemish are the ones who speak, well, it's a version of Dutch.
Yeah.
But they both, the one thing they really do agree on is beers. So, in the Ardennes, around towns like Liège, there's other breweries. So you got the two either Walloon beers or Flemish beers, but everyone likes them all. They agree on it, so it's quite cool.
It's aged red. I read up on this. You actually sent me a YouTube video, and that guy tasted it. It's quite funny. I mean, it's cheesy, but it's funny.
Cheesy, but he grows it.
And in a weird way, this signifies a lot about Belgian beers for me, from my perspective as a brewer. Because as a brewer, when we learn about beer and beer styles, and for those who don't know, there's like the BJCP is like a style guide for brewers that says this is a lager, this is a pilsner, this is a pale ale, this is a quad, and it generally links to countries. So you'll have English beers, Belgian beers, German beers. It's like they're real big. That's where it basically started, and they kind of refined the categories and the styles. And then America would go like jump onto it, and they reinvented it in a lot of ways. Like IPA is like such a big category, and it's become sort of America's signature kind of beer. IPAs and stouts, like heavy beers, big beers, massive flavor explosions. And then we all know the story about Reinhard's Gebot and having no extra ingredients, and that's from the Germans. And they came and said, look, you're not allowed to add anything other than barley, water, and hops. They didn't know yeast exists back then. Yep. Pasteur only discovered it slightly later. So it was the gods that fermented the beer. But Belgium was completely different in that they didn't give it shit. They just added stuff and made stuff. They used sugar. They use, and in this case, and I'm coming to Petrus, is cherries. Yep. And it's weird, this is not a kriek. So a very well-made kriek is typically a lambic style that will have a wild fermentation. It will go into barrels, it will age up to 3-4 plus years. It can age really well, you can cellar it. This was brewed as almost like a clean beer style. It wasn't just a wild fermentation. It's 85% of a double brown beer.
Yep.
And 15% of an aged pale ale.
Yeah, it's their
standard.
It's
a pale ale age.
It's their fooder beer. So a fooder is like a giant oak, like an oak barrel you'd use for wine, but I think the definition has to be over 4 times the size.
Yeah, a fooder is huge. So it's made out of oak, and it's massive.
So the brewery used to be known as Bavik Brewery because it's in the town of Bavikhove. It's now called the Brabandera, and their fooder beer is a beer called Aged Pale. And this beer is basically a blend, and it has 15% aged pale. The other 85% they're old brown, which is another style of Belgian beer. and then they put cherries in and they age it for 2 years. So it's quite incredible.
So they age it on cherries for 2 years.
On cherries for 2 years. And these fooders, they used to have 8, and now they've become such a specialist at fooder aged beer that they've now got 36 fooders.
Wow.
And some of those original fooders came from the Alsace region in France, which was used for making white wine. And then interestingly, they've even got some that came from Normandy that were old Calvados, which is an apple brandy fooders.
Yeah.
And it's quite incredible because I'm also not a big fan of the sweet Crick style beers.
Yeah.
When I heard this had cherries, I was a bit worried, but it's
exactly. There's some commercial versions that are very artificial
and too sweet,
too artificial, not balanced. And I guess as a beer geek myself, I tend to steer clear of those.
Whereas this Petrus aged red, so they call Petrus their sour beer range.
Yeah.
And the balance of sweet and sour is just perfect. It hits the right, and I find it an amazing beer. It is quite strong.
8.5%.
8.5%, so you can't have too many of them. But you would never think it's 8.5%.
You'd never guess it. Like, it's, from memory, it's less boozy than the Kwaremont.
Yeah, it tastes less boozy.
Yeah,
but
I think it's masked so well because it's so layered. It's a mild tart. It's not that it's sour or acidic. It's like it's a very slight sourness. It's very slightly tart. It's very layered. It's got a complex sweetness. It's not like a artificial sweet note. The cherries is bright though on the nose. Like it's incredible how bright the cherries. And I mean, it's like a dessert. Like in a weird way.
It's funny when we first went to Belgium. My wife's not a beer lover at all. And our Belgian friends bought her a 750ml Flemish Red, very much like this one.
Yes.
And she had it in the champagne, because it's sort of in the champagne style bottle with the cork and all that. And she just said, "This is the most incredible thing. I don't even like beer.
Yes.
This is even better than champagne."
You can't think of Belgian beers as in what we as South Africans grew up with as beer.
Yeah.
Like if you think Castle Lager, that is so far removed from what this is. And to give everything like perspective, that's why the BJCP or the style guide, it's got almost close to 100 styles of beer. Yeah. And we just don't know these beers. If you grew up in South Africa drinking just beer next to the braai, probably like Castle Light, Black Label, be one of the beers you grew up with. And this is so far different. You can't even say this is close to wine because it's not. It's just something completely standing on its own feet, developed over hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And something that's quite interesting about Belgian beers is that they actually brought religion into it.
With the monks.
Yeah. So Jesus did some wine, the Belgians, they made beer.
Yeah.
And it's incredible that none of these are Trappist beers. Eh?
No. So the Trappist beers had to have certain definitions. I think there's maybe 6 or 16 official Trappist beers. But some of the technicalities were that the monks were not allowed to dedicate more time to brewing than praying.
Oh, really?
So it could never if it became too commercial that it was all about the beer, then it's not a proper Trappist beer.
So God still had to be important.
And the iconic one is obviously West Fletcher, where I think they had one truck that drove down and delivered the beer into the town, and the head monk said, you're spending too much time on this beer thing, sell the truck. And they sold the truck in like the 1950s. And now you literally have to walk up to the monastery to get your case and almost show your utility bill that you live in that town to get your case. So it's that old supply and demand thing.
So Trappist beer, it's got to be brewed under the supervision of monks.
Yeah.
And I think within the walls of a monastery.
Yeah, okay.
So then I think that you can call it a Trappist. I just got to check that because some of these breweries now, if you look at La Trappe, it's quite big.
They're getting big, yeah.
They're quite big. They brew way more beer than we can brew here. Like, it's incredible. So those monks they're grafting. And but I think, praying and drinking beer can't be too bad.
Why not? I mean, out of interest, this whole fooder, certainly the Brabanderer is one of the leaders of fooder style beers. I think there's the extra fermentation that happens in the fooder when they put the cherries in and that. There are others like the guys who do Rodenbach. There are a few, but are there anyone in South Africa doing, in terms of craft brewers like you? Is anyone doing fooder beers here?
There is actually. Devil's Peak.
Okay.
So Signal Hill Brewery or Devil's Peak Brewery in the Cape. They've got fooders. They play with. It's called the Afro Funk Facility.
Okay.
It really is a marvel. Like it's like for us brewers, it gives us a bit of excitement when we see that. You know, having those kind of toys. It is extremely expensive and it's a lot of care that you need to take to brew beer in that style. I also think that it's hard to find the market here in South Africa.
Yeah.
You have to really appreciate that. Like to explain to people that your beer is going to cost you 50, 60, 70 rand.
Yeah.
Because it took 3-4 years to make. A lot can go wrong. A lot can go wrong. You can have the wrong organisms get into the system, then it's done.
Sure.
If you get oxygen coming into the system, then it's done, or too much oxygen. So in a weird way, those fooders actually allow a little bit of oxygen to get through the wood.
Okay.
But it's like micro, it's like so controlled in a weird way. So Devil's Peak has brought out, I think Vinde Saison is probably the one they're most known for.
Okay.
And I hope I remember this correctly, and it's also a blend between grapes and beer.
Okay.
So Devil's Peak's done that as well, where they take grapes and beer. I know there's been a few breweries who do it in South Africa. I know Rory from Eiger Project in Noordhoek. I think you've been there.
Yeah.
Close to the Chapman's Peak pass. So he does once or twice a year. He also does a harvest blend, sort of take some grape must, ferment it with wort in a barrel, and make some limited edition beers.
Yeah, we got a Petrus coming in late Jan called Petrus Bordeaux.
Okay.
So that's in Bordeaux. It's got a Bordeaux costs and blender, because I mean the Cape's quite a big wine. It's quite an advanced wine.
Yeah.
So if you can marry wine and beer, as Kwaremont does with cycling and beer, it should be quite interesting.
And would we get some of that for Extra Fresh customers?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, awesome.
Loyal customers, and I mean obviously it's quite sophisticated beer, so it's not for everyone. But I think you must see a lot of progress in the beer connoisseurs here. You know, advancing. It's nice to be able to offer some different stuff.
I think sometimes it's about getting home and just spoiling yourself.
Yeah.
And treating yourself. I think that's the one thing I've taken away from 2021 is we brewed a range of different beers this year. We added some limited editions, and I got into that one. I can't wait to get home and drink that beer.
Yeah.
You know, where you get so used to, we've got lager and even our pale ale, and even though they're all good, you just get used to it. But it's nice going home and like, will it be Kwaremont today? Will it be Petrus? Will it be a La Trappe? Will it be a Weiss or a Dunkel? Or it's nice having that. And I can see that especially through our customers. And obviously, thank you so much for all the support this year. And yesterday and today's deliveries that went out, quite a lot of these beers went out.
That's going to be interesting, yeah.
And I'm sure that the guys who buy Extra Fresh, a lot of them really appreciate getting something special.
I like what you were saying about a special occasion beer, because we've got one coming in called 1894, which is their flagship, only in a 750ml bottle.
And it's 1894 is just that's all that's on the bottle.
That's the year that the brewery started.
Okay.
And it's only in the 750, and it's super special. And I was thinking to myself, in South Africa, you go to a dinner party, what do you take? A bottle of wine.
Yeah.
You don't giving a beer is sort of too cheap. But in Belgium, the guys will give a very high-end 750ml beer. It's as good as a bottle of wine.
What does that retail at roughly?
It's going to be north of 130 rand.
Yeah, so it's about wine price.
But super, super special.
Yeah.
And even myself, I'll crack it for a big cycling race or a birthday or your birthday or something cool. But it's not an everyday beer. Because I guess once you pop the cork, you've got to have the whole 750.
No. Well, but you share it. At least we know how to do that in South Africa.
True. South Africans are good at sharing.
We do have one thing that we still have to achieve between the two of us, or not. We don't have to achieve it. We need somebody in Belgium to achieve it. Is to win a freaking significant cycling race, so that we can have our best veteran 12.
Yeah, we've had a West Veteran 12, and we keep bringing it out. And all we said, we'll have a Flemish winner of a big race. Has to be one of the 5 monuments, or the Olympics or World Champs.
Yeah, and Wout van Aert has come close.
And he's come second so many times, and the West Veteran goes back. So I don't know, maybe we need to wait for our birthdays.
I actually had a braai yesterday at my place, and I was restocking the fridge, and I was just like carefully hide it at the back so that nobody accidentally opens it. Because that is very limited, and I think that beer has been voted best beer in the world a couple of times.
Yeah, it was by Beer Rater, and it's the whole supply and demand thing. And there were stories of people paying up to $100 for one sort of 330 ml beer.
Yeah, and there's no label on it. There's literally just the glass has got the bottle's got like a little collar.
Yeah.
And then on the cap, it says Westvleteren 10.2 or 5%. And I look forward to it. So hopefully next year, if Wout van Aert can hear us out there, like Brew, win something so we can, win a monument. He wins actually quite a lot. So he's done really well this year.
What I'd love to see, what's quite interesting with the Belgian culture is that you always put the right beer in the right glass. So
that's true.
Glasses, true. And there's so many different styles. There's chalices, there's goblets, there's tulips.
There's even some that look like test tubes.
Yeah, that's the one called Quack. It actually is held by a wooden frame. It's got a ball on the end.
Exactly. And I know if you go to the Anker in Cape Town, you have to give them your shoe before they give you a glass, because the Oaks would just want to steal those glasses.
Incredible.
Yeah, so glasses like this is the Teku. This is more American or stout style beers, but I just love it. And hopefully next year, we as a brewer can get some glassware in. It's hard to find it in South Africa, so we have to import it, which is a challenge. Hopefully now that we have friends that import stuff from Belgium, we can get some good glassware in, and then we can make it available to you. So thanks for joining us today. You can subscribe to this channel. There's probably only 4 or 5 videos a year. So if you don't want to miss them, you can subscribe. We have a mixed crate of Belgian beers on the site, on the extrafresh.co.za or Mad Giant website. Go to Extra Fresh. Once you sign in, you'll see there is a Belgium mixed crate, so you can literally play with what you want in the crate. We've got 5 beers. We've discussed 2 today. I'm going to have Philip Timmerman, an actual Belgian, come and speak to me next. And I think we're the only Oaks in the country that do that for you. And it's only limited to Extra Fresh customers. We're not shipping it to Cape Town or anywhere. Got to live in Joburg, and you got to be an Extra Fresh customer. So yeah, thanks again, Rob. Cheers, man. I always enjoy this chat.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Cheers, man.